Do you guys want to hear something crazy? No, really, this is bizarre. When I was a baby, my mom met a man. She married him. He raised me until I was 8 years old. I thought he was my father. He was my stepfather. One day he went to the store. He never came back. I did not see him for 21, 22 years. If you hear licking sounds, it's my cat. These two paintings were in the dining room of my childhood home. And then when I became school age, I would come home from school. I would sit right in front of them and I would speak to them as if they were my parents. I would talk to them. I had some weird connection. Right around this time, from like toddler to like 6, 7 years old, every night before I went to bed, I had these footsteps that would come down the hallway, and the metal doorknob on the old Victorian house would rattle, and this lovely couple would come in, and I was so excited to see them. They would talk to me, they would smile, and they would tuck me in. I did reach a point, probably about 6 or 7, where I had finally addressed it, where I said to my mother and my stepfather, if I don't get to bed soon, like my friends aren't going to be able to come tuck me in, like something like that. There was something that triggered this, and, to their surprise, and who tucks you in? And I explained to them, that I had these two people that came in and tucked me in every night, and they were pretty freaked out by it. But also at that point in my life, they'd been freaked out by a lot of stuff that I said, so I don't think they paid it too much mind. Fast forward again, my mom and my stepdad get divorced, okay? My mom kites these. She takes them. She puts them in a storage unit. She did not take them out again until I was moving out of state, getting married, yada, yada. And then she gave me the key and said, well, if you're getting your own house and you're getting married and stuff, I want you to have these. And I was just utter shock. I could not believe she still had them. I had been estranged from them for so long. I missed them. So I just had this dejected look on my face the whole time, and I packed them up and I didn't ask too many questions. Lock in, we're not even at the crazy part yet. Let's fast forward a little bit more. I am with some friends, we're drinking, we're talking, and out comes this tale about how when I drink certain drinks, my alter ego named Gail comes out. And Gail is not someone I invented. She introduced herself to the gang. And the next morning when I would have anxiety and be like, oh my God, what did I say? What did I do? Everyone would be like, oh, that was just Gail. And this is a whole thing that was going on in 2 different friend groups that I had, not even to my knowledge. So the funny on-running joke for the last 10 years or so has been if I drink X, Y, and Z, I'm not even going to tell you, Gail comes out. And Gail is this wealthy older woman who lives in Rhode Island, and she's been married a handful of times. Sometimes we kind of think she killed her husbands. It's kind of weird. She's big in jewelry. She wears all of her old wedding rings, Super Bowl rings. There's just so much lore with Gail introducing herself. Today, okay? We're here. We're present times. I reconnect with my estranged stepfather. I find out that at one point in my childhood, he broke out a photo of his parents. My stepfather grew up in the house that he lived in with me. He bought his old childhood home. We moved in there. He found a photo in the attic of his parents, and he took it downstairs, and my mother framed it, and we put it up on the TV, and I walked in one day, and I went, oh my God, I go, those are my friends who tucked me in at night. Where did you find that photo? And he was like, those are my dead parents, Savannah. What are you talking about? It was a whole thing. So we had discovered that day, I don't really remember that. We discovered that day that, his parents were the ghosts that were coming in and tucking me in at night. These pictures were heirlooms. They were heirlooms from his family. Okay. When I'm growing up and I'm being forced to reconcile with my biological father, whom I did not know, I felt like I had no connection with him, but I was always longing and pining for my stepfather. I felt like that was my dad, my family, my soul connection. I missed him so much. So we're reconnecting. I'm finding out that, his parents were the ghosts that used to tuck me in. These pictures that I've been toting around for the last 10 years are heirlooms of his. There's more. In that house that I grew up in, where all of these ghostly things were happening to me, when he was a child, there was a woman named Gail. I'm going to be honest, I spaced who she is. She was like a friend of the family or a cousin or an aunt or best friend's aunt or something like that. There was a drunken old woman who fell down the stairs in that house. The stairs were connected to my bedroom. My bedroom had 2 entryways. The stairs were connected to my bedroom. She fell down and died. Her name was Gail. Gail had a drinking problem, and she wore too much jewelry. There's more. My stepfather's mother, the ghost that would come in and tuck me in at night, I found out recently, a couple months ago, her and I share the same birthday because my stepfather texted me and said happy birthday on my birthday. We just reconciled within this last year. Like, we just started talking. I found it odd that he remembered my birthday, so I actually said to him, I was like, you remembered my birthday after all this time? And he said, yeah, you and my mother have the same birthday. He asked what I was doing for my birthday. I told him I was going to the Omni Hotel in the White Mountains, the White Mountain Resort, Rushmore. New Hampshire, Omni, big white, red roof. Everybody loves it. I love it there. I've always wanted to go there. My boyfriend, my lovely boyfriend, he made arrangements for us to go celebrate my birthday for a couple days there. And that was on my bucket list. I had always wanted to go there. Why did I want to go there? I used to have dreams that I was in the ballroom dancing. I had never been there. I had never heard stories or seen pictures, but I just always had this yearning to go. When I was married, I always asked my husband if he would take me there, and he'd say no. That's why I have a boyfriend now. So my boyfriend took me there. So I tell my stepdad, I go, yeah, for my birthday, we're going to the, the place. And he goes, oh, that's so funny. My parents used to go there once a year. They would go dancing in the ballroom. Well, anyway, I'm going to get cracking on this book here. I got to finish this thing. And tomorrow, that stepdad and I, that old guy, we're going to go shoot some golf balls and have a good time. Yeah, tomorrow we're going to hang out. So anyway.
Bob had been out in the woods all day, hunting for deer. When he got back to his little cabin, it was almost dark and he was shocked to find the front door was standing open. Cautiously, he crept into the cabin and was surprised to see a young lady standing in front of the fireplace. She was the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen. She had a really pretty face and long brown hair that came to her shoulders. She was wearing a white vest that was tied up at her stomach and a pair of blue jeans that accentuated her curves. The young lady said her name was Jessica, and she was lost. She'd come out to the woods to stay at her father's lodge, but had wandered off and couldn't find her way back. She said she'd spent all day wandering in the forest trying to help. Bob said that he would help her, but it was too late to go walking through the woods. She'd have to stay the night in his cabin, and in the morning he would lead her back to her father's lodge. Jessica thanked him and offered to cook him dinner in return for his kindness.
Oh, please.
Over dinner, they talked for a while, and Bob was glad to have company. He didn't meet many women, living alone as he did in his little cabin in the woods.
Why don't you just cook, Bob?
I wouldn't accept food off a man.
He
Well,
goes
actually, I
hunting
probably
deer
would
by
if I was
himself and
hungry enough.
Depends what he's offering.
And the worry of, is he going to drug me? Eventually, Jessica started to get sleepy. It was almost 2 o'clock in the morning, and Bob told her that she could take his bed and he would sleep in a chair. She climbed into bed, fully dressed, and before long, sleeping soundly. She looked like she needed the rest. Bob watched as she slept. He thought she was one of the most gorgeous girls he'd ever seen. He wondered if she could fall in love with a man like him. She was the kind of woman he'd longed for all his life. Young, brown hair, beautiful.
Wow, such an imagination, Bob.
Young.
Could you pick anything else?
Why is it that my top of my list for a man isn't young? Jessica slept on the bed. He sat in a chair, listening to music on the radio. He kept the volume low so that he wouldn't wake Jessica. Then, just as he was dozing off, the music on the radio was interrupted by a local news broadcast. The reporter said that the police were combing the area in search of a prisoner who'd escaped from the state hospital of the criminally insane. Bob's ears pricked up. The reporter said that the woman who'd escaped was armed and dangerous. She'd been convicted of the grisly murders of her husband and 4 other men and was sent to prison for them. Psychologists who examined her declared her mentally ill, and she was transferred to the state hospital for the criminally insane.
That boy needs therapy.
However, as she was being transported, she managed to overpower the guards using a knife she'd stolen from the prison cafeteria. She'd stabbed them to death and escaped into the woods. The police had been searching for her all day. On the radio, they gave a description of the crazy lady. She was 5'4", 26 years old, brunette, and very attractive. Wearing a prison uniform when she escaped, but they'd said she'd probably try to steal some clothes to disguise herself. The police warned people to be on the lookout for the crazy lady and advised anyone who came across her to keep their distance. Bob's blood froze as he looked at Jessica, lying there peacefully on his bed. She fit the description perfectly. She was the escaped maniac the police were looking for, and he was sure that she was planning to kill him while he slept. He wasn't going to let that happen, and he knew what he had to do. Suddenly, Bob jumped out of his chair and threw open the front door of the cabin. Jessica awoke with a fright and looked at him, a confused expression on her face. He grabbed her by the hair, pulling her out of the bed and dragging her towards the door. He managed to wrestle her at the front door, then with a mighty heave, he threw her out into the darkness. She landed on the grass outside and immediately jumped back up and came running towards the door. Bob slammed the wooden door shut and had just enough time to lock and bolt it before she slammed into it. He braced himself against the door, expecting her to break it down at any moment. He could hear her outside pounding on the cabin door with her fists, kicking it with her boots and shouting at him to let her in. Then he heard her scream. It sounded like the howls of a crazed animal, the kind of sound that could only be made by a person who was completely insane. There was a horrible silence. He could hear something shifting and moving about outside the wooden door. He was shaking with fear. After a while, he noticed a thin trickle of blood coming under the door. Soon, it turned into a pool of blood flowing across the floor at his feet. Gathering his wits about him, Bob slowly opened the front door and was horrified by what he found. Jessica lying there in a pool of blood, a large knife sticking out of her head. She was completely naked. Her eyes were glazed over. His mind raced as he tried to understand the strange scene that lay before him. But stranger still was the neat pile of blue clothing which was sitting on the grass beside Jessica's dead body. Reaching over her naked corpse, he picked up the blue clothes and turning them over in his hands, he realised it was a blue uniform. There was some black lettering printed on the back. It read, "State Hospital for the Criminally Insane."
Go ahead and scroll if you get scared easy, because I have another paranormal story submission, and this one is insane. If you're from Michigan, which I am, you probably don't want to hear this because this has me so deep in my head, but let's just get into reading it and then you can tell me your thoughts. The subject scared me because it actually says, "Please read this before I disappear." Excuse me. Anyways, let's get into it. They say, "I don't know how much time I have to tell you this information. I chose your page because I saw that you're also from Michigan. I don't know if you've ever heard of Croswell." Pause. I actually haven't. It's a tiny town near Lake Huron that most people have never even heard of, but that's where all of this happened. There are only 2 reasons that I'm writing this. First, if anyone would understand why this scares me, I think it would be someone from Michigan. Second, because I really think it's important that other people are aware of what's going on. Just please don't use my name, call me M. I grew up just outside of Croswell. Like every small town in Michigan, we grew up hearing ghost stories about the woods and the shoreline. Everyone just laughed them off. I don't laugh about it anymore. A few years ago, I took a maintenance job working around Michigan's old emergency warning sirens. Like everyone else, I thought they were only there for tornadoes and severe weather. I was wrong. One night after 2 a.m., one of the oldest sirens activated even though the weather was perfectly clear. Before dispatch hung up, they said something I'd never heard before. They said, "Do not approach the siren until it goes completely silent." I asked why, but nobody answered me. We finally got there. The sound wasn't right. The warning tone was there, but underneath it, there were voices, hundreds of them, whispering over one another. Some sounded like children. Some sounded impossibly old. One sounded exactly like my grandmother who had been dead for 6 years. I froze. The older technician grabbed my arm so hard it ended up leaving bruises. He whispered, "Don't answer them." I asked him what he meant. He never looked away from the siren. He quietly said, "Sometimes the ghosts think somebody finally heard them." Next morning, we were told the activation had been caused by an electrical malfunction. We were ordered to replace the equipment, sign the paperwork, and never discuss what happened. A few days later, the older technician pulled me to the side and he asked me one question. "Which dead relative called your name?" I had never told him that I had heard my grandmother. When I asked him how he knew, he just stared at me. They always start with somebody that you loved. After that conversation, he never came back to work. No retirement party, no goodbye. That should have been the end of it. Instead, I started researching. What scared me the most wasn't the ghost stories, it was the real history. People call them lakes, but standing on the shoreline doesn't feel like you're looking at a lake. It feels like an ocean. Great Lakes hold about 20% of the world's surface fresh water. They create their own weather. Storms appear out of nowhere. Thousands of shipwrecks have been documented, and countless people have disappeared into them over the centuries. The deeper I looked, the worse it got. The water stays unbelievably cold, even during the summer. In the deepest parts, it's only a few degrees above freezing year-round. Divers say the darkness starts long before you reach the bottom, and it feels like descending into another world. Then I found the stories about the Michigan Triangle. People compare it to the Bermuda Triangle because of its shipwrecks, disappearances, and unexplained legends. I once had mentioned that to the older technician. He shook his head. People think the triangle is dangerous because things disappear there, but they've got it backwards. I asked him what he meant. He leaned in closer. Nothing disappears. They just stay. I laughed. He didn't. Then he said something I'll never forget. The Great Lakes don't just keep shipwrecks. They keep the dead. He believed the sirens weren't warning people about storms. He believed they were drowning out something from calling beneath the water. Ever since that night, every monthly siren test is exactly the same. 30 seconds before it starts, my phone loses service. Every clock in my house stops. The temperature drops so fast, I can see my breath. Every mirror reflects somebody is standing behind me. They're soaking wet. They're always facing away from me. When I turn around, there's no one there. Dreams started after that. I'm standing alone on the shoreline of Lake Huron, the lake perfectly still. Dozens of figures are standing chest deep in the water. None of them move. None of them breathe. They're all facing away from me. Then the siren begins. Every single one of them slowly turns toward me, their mouths open, but instead of screaming, they whisper my name. Every month they get closer. Last night, they weren't standing in the water anymore. They were standing on the beach. If anyone else from Michigan has experienced something they can't explain near the Great Lakes or during the monthly siren tests, I'd like to know that I'm not alone. Maybe it's nothing, maybe it's just another ghost story. I honestly hope that's all it is. But if it isn't, I think whatever is waiting beneath those lakes has stayed there by accident. First of all, thank you so much for trusting me to share your story. I was bred, born, and raised in Michigan, still live in Michigan, so this story really, really caught my eye. I've never personally heard of Croswell, and usually when I go to a Great Lake, it's Lake Michigan. While I've never personally had an experience, I want you to look up on, what is it called? Unsolved Mysteries. There's an episode about Michigan, and it is about the largest UFO report. We're talking like hundreds and hundreds of reports that has ever happened in the history of literally ever. And they happened on the Great Lakes. It's super insane. My wife and I watched it and I was like, anyone watching this, if you've had a similar situation or just a spooky situation pertaining to the Great Lakes in Michigan, you can either go ahead and shoot me a message to my email above. Also, just if you want to submit your own personal paranormal and or scary story, you can also submit your story to the email above. I'm like hundreds of stories behind, so please be patient with me. I'm trying to get to them all. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments. As always, thank you for watching. Love you. Bye.
Storytime on how I cut off my mother because she tried to make me take a pregnancy test in front of my father and siblings. This is not my story time while I make slime. It was sent in by a fan, and to be honest, it's crazy. I cannot tell you if the story is real or not. You already know the dealio. Get your money's worth and let it drain. I look like this because I'm filming a bedrot series on YouTube. Sorry for being so aggressive, but let's get into the story time. This woman's name is Noelle, and she's about 22 years old, and this situation happened when she was 19 years old. So Noelle and her boyfriend PJ had been seeing each other since they were 14. Her mother never approved of her seeing PJ whatsoever because she thought PJ was a terrible influence. But that didn't matter because PJ and Noelle literally lived across the street from each other. They went to the same school, they had the same after-school programs, so they were going to be in close proximity. They ended up dating because they practically grew up with each other, and Noelle's mother did not like this. Noelle's mother tried to make every excuse in the book known to man to get her to break up with PJ, but it never worked because PJ was actually a good person. So at this point, Noelle and PJ have been dating since they were 14, 15 years old, and Noelle and PJ are both over the ages of 18. So Noelle and PJ start to do grown folks' business. And when Noelle's mother finds out, she's extremely furious, even though they're grown and they don't even live with the mother anymore. She invites them over for a family dinner. After Noelle's mother finds out about this, she invites Noelle over for dinner. Noelle comes over because she has no idea her mother knows that she's indulging in grown folks' business, but Noelle stepped into a trap. Now, Noelle ended up drinking like a lot of water, and so she goes to the bathroom. And when she goes to the bathroom, her mom pulls up to the bathroom with her and hands her a pregnancy test. And then she calls not only the dad, and then she calls not only the siblings, but her dad. Everybody is confused why they're surrounding the bathroom, and the dad is like, I'm not gonna look at my daughter, like, use the bathroom. And Noelle was like, Mom, what are you doing? And she's like, take the test. I know you're like having, out of marriage. She's basically telling Noelle that I know that you're like having before marriage. And she's like, I don't want you to have a child out of wedlock. Take the test. Like, I found out, take the test. Now everyone is shocked because they're standing in front of the freaking bathroom door. I accidentally said bedroom, don't clock me. And their mother and wife is demanding her daughter to take a pregnancy test in front of everyone, right? And the reason why she did this was because she didn't want one of her daughters to like give Noelle their urine to take the test for them. She wanted to make sure, so she had the door wide open. She would not let Noelle close the door, and she was like, you need to take the test. This is instant snow. But Noelle is like shocked at this point because guess what? Noelle was pregnant, but she already knew she was pregnant, and she was planning to tell her family this because she thought it was going to be good news. Everyone is literally telling like Noelle's mom to chill. They're like, Mom, chill. The dad is like, you need to chill, like you're doing too much. And Noelle's mom could care freaking less. She's still going. She's like demanding Noelle to take the test. She's like she's literally slamming the test on the counter to make her take it. And at this point, Noelle just starts crying, and one of her siblings calls PJ. PJ immediately arrives, and he immediately like cuts through in front of everybody. And this is where PJ like stands up to the mom, and he's like, you're literally taking it too far. He slams the bathroom door, and all you can hear is like Noelle crying. So after that, Noelle's mother, she didn't stop there. You thought that would stop her? No, she didn't stop there. She was like, okay, if you're not going to take the test, get out of my house. She's cussing Noelle out through the bathroom door. So Noelle obviously gets her stuff together and she leaves. You're probably wondering, if Noelle and PJ do not live with Noelle's mother, how did she find out about them doing grown-up activities? Well, the day that Noelle was moving out, she left a plan B like in the trash can, and Noelle's mother seen it. So after Noelle and PJ leaves, you think that Noelle's mother would stop. No, she goes on Facebook, and she starts like just disrespecting Noelle and PJ on Facebook, calling her daughter calling her a whore, calling her yeah. So about a couple of days later, Noelle's dad calls her and basically tells her that he apologized for like her mother's actions. And this is where Noelle shares the good news that she's bringing a child into the world. And like Noelle's dad is so happy, but she's like, you cannot tell Mom. So Noelle and PJ ended up getting eloped, and they brought their beautiful baby girl into the world. Now, after they brought the baby girl into the world, obviously they posted pictures on like Instagram and Facebook. And when they posted those pictures, Noelle's mother seen it, and she immediately texted like Noelle. She was like, you had a baby and da-da-da-da, like, can I please see my granddaughter? Like, immediately switching up like she wasn't going absolutely insane 9 months prior. Mind you, that entire time, Noelle's mother did not contact her to say sorry. She did not apologize. And Noelle even tried reaching out to her, and she ignored her messages. If you're wondering why I'm rolling the slime around the table, it's to get like the little specks of like instant snow. Anyways, so Noelle's mother does a complete 360, and she's calling her. She's literally calling her like 4 times a day, like blowing up her phone, texting her, like tagging her on Facebook, all that. So Noelle finally confronts her mother, and she's like, look, you will not be seeing my granddaughter. You will not be meeting her. I actually want to hear nothing from you. You disrespected me and PJ from the moment that we got together, and you literally disrespected me 9 months prior about how I would be bringing a child into the world out of wedlock, and they would instantly be going to HE double hockey sticks. So the mom's like, why are you doing this to me? You're torturing me. Like, why? Like, I just want to be a part of my granddaughter's life. But like, girl, no, you didn't. Yeah. Do y'all think she's the a-hole? Me personally, I don't. I'm breathing hard, y'all, because this is a workout. But bye.
If you went to summer camp as a kid, then you probably remember sitting around a campfire and listening to scary stories. Most of them were completely made up, but every once in a while, something happens that becomes the new camp legend, indiscernible from the made up stories. That's exactly what happened in tonight's spooky story. So grab a blanket, maybe a snack, and get settled in for tonight's Midnight Confessions Stories from the Dark. When I was in college, I worked as a summer camp counselor at a camp on the edge of a large lake. One of the first things every camper had to do upon arrival was to pass a swim test. The test wasn't difficult. They just had to swim out onto a floating platform anchored about 50 yards from shore, climb onto it, and then swim back. It was a decades-long tradition that didn't seem to serve any purpose other than as a fun initiation and to make sure the kids knew how to swim to safety if needed. It was the summer of 1993, and I was assigned to a cabin of boys. Most of them were loud and energetic, as young boys tend to be, but one of them, whom I'll call Ethan, was a bit strange. He wasn't exactly shy, as he participated in camp activities and had a couple of friends, but from time to time, I would notice him abruptly stop in the middle of an activity and walk off alone just to stare out at the lake. He could be mid-sprint at full speed, and suddenly, his body would go rigid, eyes locked on the water. Calling out his name did nothing, and neither did gripping his shoulder and giving him a gentle shake. Eventually, he would snap out of whatever trance-like state he was in and just continue whatever he had been doing before it happened. On the morning of the swim test, Ethan was one of the first kids in the water. Everything seemed normal at first. He swam out to the platform without any problems, climbed onto it, and sat down. The counselor running the test blew his whistle and told him to swim back. But Ethan didn't move. The counselor called out again. He still didn't move. We assumed Ethan was just being difficult. Kids tested boundaries all the time at camp. But the way he sat didn't look defiant. He was leaning slightly forward, eyes locked on the water's surface beside the platform. One of the lifeguards paddled out to talk to him. Even from shore, I could tell the conversation was strange. I saw the lifeguard put his hand on Ethan's shoulder and try to talk to him. Ethan didn't look up from the water, but he did shake his head. The lifeguard said something else, and again, Ethan didn't respond. After a few minutes, the lifeguard called for one of the counselors to assist him. As I was getting ready to jump in the water, Ethan's head snapped toward the lifeguard, and he hissed at him. Then he jumped into the water and swam ashore as if nothing happened. Later that day, I pulled Ethan aside to ask what happened. He refused to answer my questions and ran off to play with the other kids. So I decided to call his parents. I went into the counselor's office and pulled out the directory. I got to the page where Ethan's parents should be listed under his name, but they weren't listed. Each child was supposed to have a folder with their summer camp registration information, so I went to pull Ethan's. Once again, there was no file. I decided to bring this up to the camp director later that evening. From what I knew, it was exceptionally important for every child to be properly documented, so it was unusual for a child's records to be entirely missing. The rest of the day went on as usual, but I kept noticing Ethan looking toward the lake. Every so often, he'd stop whatever he was doing and look in that direction just for a few seconds. That night, just after lights out, one of the counselors noticed Ethan wasn't in his cabin. Within minutes, every counselor was outside with flashlights, searching the camp. After a couple of hours, we found him standing chest deep in the lake, facing the platform. As we got closer, we realized he was mumbling. Jared, one of the counselors, went into the water to bring Ethan back to shore, but just as Jared was about to put his hand on Ethan's shoulder, Jared screamed and reached down towards his right leg before falling face first and disappearing beneath the water. All of us ran over to him and grabbed his arms and legs, trying to help him stand up. But we quickly realized it wasn't going to be that easy. Something was preventing us from pulling him back up. After several minutes of struggling, we finally pulled him free. The other counselors carried him ashore, and I grabbed Ethan's hand and pulled him along with us. Jared had to be taken to the hospital. He had a large gash on his leg that was bleeding profusely. As I was getting Ethan settled into his cabin, I tried to figure out why he was out there, but he refused to speak. Afterward, the other counselors and I met to figure out what to do next, given the zero tolerance policy for breaking camp rules. I reported that Ethan's information was missing and that we had no way to contact his parents. The other counselors searched as well and confirmed there were no records of Ethan. The next morning, the camp director questioned Ethan about his behavior and tried to obtain his parents' information. Ethan still refused to speak, so the camp director called the police. They arrived and took Ethan with them, assuring us that they would track down his parents. A couple of weeks went by without incident. One afternoon, a girl named Sally started screaming for help while standing in the middle of the platform. The lifeguard went out on a small boat to get her. When they returned, Sally jumped off the boat onto land and began screaming, pointing at the platform and claiming she had heard voices in the water, telling her to jump in and fill her lungs with water. Over the next few days, multiple kids reported either hearing voices from across the lake where the platform was, or seeing shadows in the water. The camp director said it was just voices carrying across the lake and the kids feeding off each other's imagination. Nevertheless, swimming in that lake was banned for the rest of the summer. I would have accepted that explanation if I hadn't spoken with Jared after he was discharged from the hospital and returned home. In addition to the deep gash on his leg, Jared told me that the doctor informed him that he had multiple marks on his leg that closely resembled human bite marks. So, do you think the camp director was right and the kids were just feeding off each other's imagination? Or do you think there really was something beneath the platform? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to follow for more Midnight Confessions.
This duende story chills. I have chills. Also, these are my earrings. You can't see them because my earlobes suck. This lady says that when her youngest daughter was 4 years old, she had an imaginary friend. Her daughter would describe him as like this little tiny old man with a really long beard. Now her husband would tell her that he thinks that imaginary friend was a duende. She did think that it was weird that her daughter would describe her imaginary friend as like this little tiny old man with a beard, but she didn't want to give it that much importance. Now, the girl telling the story says that her mom would tell her that when she was younger, she also had a duende, that she would tell her mom that this little man would pull her hair and make her cry, so she was always terrified of sleeping by herself. Now, she says that she doesn't remember any of it, but she is very much scared of duendes and things of that sort. She was so scared of this topic that she ended up asking her husband, the girl's older sisters, even her mom, to talk to that girl because she just didn't want to entertain that conversation. It really did scare her. She went as far as to ask them to like maybe show her a different cartoon, show her like different movies, so that maybe this imaginary friend would change and not be like this little old man she's describing, because obviously it sounds like a duende. She knows that it's silly and she sounds so stupid, but like she couldn't handle listening to her daughter like talk about this imaginary friend. Like she couldn't deal with it anymore. It would scare her so much. So there was one day where her and her husband were in the living room and the daughter was in her bedroom that she shared with her siblings, but she was in there by herself. The rest of her daughters were outside, so it was just mom and dad and daughter all alone in that house. And out of nowhere is when they hear like somebody slap somebody really hard. After hearing that slap, they hear that the daughter is crying in the bedroom, so they both get up and go run into her room. When they look at her, they say that there was like a tiny handprint on her cheek. They could tell that she got slapped really hard because her cheek was all red and that little handprint, but they know that it wasn't their other daughters because they could literally see them through the window. There was nobody else that could have slapped her, and when the girl finally calmed down from crying, she tells her parents that it was her friend. She tells them that he got mad and slapped her, and they didn't know what to say or do other than to tell her that they believed her. They told her that they would take care of her and that they would make sure that her friend wouldn't hurt her again. Now, she said that she had never been so scared in her life other than that night. They ended up letting her sleep with them. She remembers laying in bed next to her daughter, and like any little sound that she would hear would like startle her. She would be so scared. And thankfully, nothing happened throughout the night. The daughter also said that she would not be playing with him if he showed up again. She finally got over everything that happened, and with time, she completely forgot about her imaginary friend. Or at least that is what the mom thought. Her daughter is now 8 years old, and she doesn't remember how the topic of the conversation came up of her imaginary friend, that little old man. They started talking about how she got slapped, and in the dinner table with everybody around, she started to tell them why her friend had slapped her. Apparently, her friend told her that she didn't look like her mom because she wasn't a crybaby. That is when her daughter told her friend to shut up and not to be talking bad about her mom. When she says this, she says that her friend started laughing and that made her really mad. Not only did this friend continue to laugh, but then he kept saying, "Your mom's a crybaby, your mom's a crybaby." And that is when her daughter tried to hit her friend for making fun of the mom. When she went to swing at this thing, which by the way, go you, because yeah, what the fuck, don't be talking shit about my mom. He was no longer there, totally missed, and apparently he popped up again next to her, but this time he wasn't the little old man. It was almost as he grew to be as tall as her. She explains that she had never seen her imaginary friend grow that tall just to slap her, and after he slaps her, he runs and almost gets smaller and smaller and got underneath the dresser. She described it as like, you know, like if you see a rat run and try to like squeeze into a space that knows nobody can get through, that is what the imaginary friend did, and that is what it looked like. From underneath the dresser, he popped his head out and tells the little girl that he was gonna come for her. And that is when, you know, mom and dad walk in and they're like, what the fuck happened? Because they heard the slap, and she was crying. The daughter had also mentioned that he just kept talking shit about her mom, like saying other things. And that's when finally the mom was like, well, what was he saying about me that made you so angry? Her daughter tells her that the duende was telling her how he used to pull her mom's hair when she was little, and that her mom would cry and he would be so happy just messing with her. Oh my god. She remembers dropping her fork as soon as she heard her daughter say that. She started shaking. She was so scared because there's no way that her daughter would have known that. Her mom had told her that, you know, a while ago wasn't something that she would go around talking about again. She's terrified of duendes. So how the fuck did her daughter know? And was this duende the same duende that had messed with her when she was a kid? Now she says that her husband, like, he wasn't the kind of person that would be so scared easily or anything like that, but there was something that their daughter mentioned that did scare him so much when she said it. There was something that this friend had told the daughter that the daughter told the dad without the mom hearing, because she knew how scared her mom was at that point. Her friend, the duende, had told her that he was gonna come back while her mom and her were asleep, but that he never told her when he was gonna come back. Her daughter, even at 8 years old now, goes to bed every night in fear that that is the night where her friend will return. And that is how it ends. And you want to know why? Because this happened 2 weeks ago. This conversation at the dinner table happened 2 weeks ago. Like, fuck, I would not be able to sleep after that. What do you guys think?
I got a really creepy cryptid story for you from the Appalachia. So my follower named Ashley, who I will be tagging in this, sent me this story the other day, and oh my goodness. This happened to Ashley when she was just 13 years old, when they were living in the middle of nowhere in the Appalachia Mountains. To give you an idea of how far out they were, the closest neighbor was 12 miles up the road. So one night, Ashley's cousin came to stay with her, and she was from the city and never stayed in the woods before. So they decided that they were going to go camping at the end of Ashley's property. And this setup was perfect because there was a creek right there, there was an old fire pit, and even an old camper. And Ashley's dad said that, yeah, that was fine as long as they take the dog. She had a Great Pyrenees, by the way. And that worked out really well because that dog went everywhere with her. So they packed up a bunch of stuff, some board games, things to make s'mores and the like. They even brought her laptop so they could watch some movies. It was going to be a really good night. Or so they thought. So they get to the spot and they're at the fire and it's just about to get dark and they start to tell each other creepy stories. My kind of night. So then Ashley starts to tell her cousin this story about this old barn that's about a mile up the road. She said that it was a little bit off the road and it was dilapidated and falling apart. And sometimes at night they could hear weird noises coming from inside this barn. So Ashley's cousin wanted to check this place out. So they decided that they were going to wait until it got completely dark, until all the lights were off in their house, so that they could sneak out and go see this thing. So once everything was clear, they decided to head out to this barn. And once they got there, it was about 12:30 a.m. Ashley said they were acting crazy and trying to get a rise out of each other and try to freak each other out and scare each other. Remember that they had the dog with them, and on their travels, nothing really weird happened. The dog didn't act weird, so eventually they just got bored and headed back to the campsite. So ever since they had turned around and started making their way back, now the dog is starting to act strange. The dog kept turning around and looking back and almost seemed like it was trying to urge them forward faster. And then Ashley turns around to see what is the dog looking at. And she said that when she looked up, what she saw made her heart drop. She saw, standing up on top of the barn, what looked like a deer, but all wrong. She said it was standing up on two legs and it had a long gray body that just looked all wrong, and its arms were way too long for its body. And she saw its antlers on the top of its head, and she noticed its bright, glowing yellow eyes. Okay, so quickly they shut off their flashlights, hoping that it wouldn't have seen them. And they went over and kind of snuck behind a bush. And Ashley's cousin's like, "What are we doing?" And Ashley's like, "Hold on, like quiet, like don't say anything." And then you guys, they hear the sound of that thing jump off of the roof with a thud onto the ground. So they start screaming and running back to camp, and the dog beelined it for the creature. They get all the way home, and she said her dad was coming off of the porch, and they ran to him and they told him everything that happened. So Ashley's dad takes them inside to the mother, and then he gets his GUN and he calls his friend from up the road, and they go out to investigate. She says her mom tried to calm them down and tell them that everything was going to be okay, but everything was just crazy at this point. They were absolutely terrified, and Ashley was so worried for her dad and her dog, and they did not return until the break of day. When they finally did come back, her father and his buddy and the dog, all three did return, and they said that they were tracking this thing all night long, and it kept circling their property. Also, their poor dog was ripped apart on its side. So they called the vet, and the vet comes out and takes a look at this poor dog and says it appears as though the dog got ripped apart by a large cat. The vet said, judging by its injuries, that she is surprised that the dog even was able to get away. Ashley says that she is now 31 and the dog did survive for a while, and they only lost her a few years ago of old age. I am so happy to hear that the dog got to live a full life. And now Ashley ends it with this. She says that lately, all of a sudden, she's starting to see those same yellow glowing eyes. I know Ashley will be in the comments reading what your thoughts are. What do you guys think this was? I have heard of so many cryptids, and also so many new things that I guess would be cryptids that I had never heard of before. So drop them in the comments. And if you've got your own creepy cryptid story, I would love if you would share it with me. If you're interested in Creepy Storytime merch, check out the LINK in my bio. And if you're new here, you gotta follow for more Creepy Storytime.
My doorbell camera recorded me standing on my porch at 3 a.m. asking to be let inside. This is Scared with Jess and today's story is about the video that I still can't explain. I woke up to 6 motion alerts from my front door camera, and that wasn't unusual by itself. My neighborhood had cats and raccoons, people walking dogs too early in the morning, all of that. But the first alert was from 3:12 a.m. and the thumbnail made me sit straight up in bed. It was me, standing on my own front porch. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, trying to make sense of it. I was in bed and I had just woken up. My bedroom door was locked, my phone was on the nightstand, and I was still wearing the same oversized t-shirt I had fallen asleep in. In the camera thumbnail, I was also wearing that shirt. I opened the video, and for the first few seconds, nothing happened. The porch light was on and the street behind me was dark, and then I walked into frame. or something that looked exactly like me did. It came from the left side of the porch, like it had been standing just out of view. It stopped in front of the door and looked directly into the camera. I had my hair down and my face looked tired. It was completely normal though, and that almost made it worse. I didn't look like a monster or a distorted version of me. It looked like me on a bad night. And then it knocked. 3 quiet taps. I turned my volume up and the thing outside said, "Open the door." It was my voice. Not close to my voice, but exactly my voice. It was soft and tired, maybe even a little irritated. The exact way I sound when I've been woken up. I watched the rest of the clip barely breathing, and it knocked again and said, "I know you're in there." The video ended and I checked the next alert. Same thing, me standing there knocking, asking to come inside. And in the third clip, it leaned closer to the camera and whispered, "Why are you ignoring me?" That was when I got out of bed and checked my bedroom door, and it was still locked. I don't know why I did that. If someone was already inside, a locked bedroom door wouldn't mean much, but I needed something to tell me I had been in my room all night. I have a small camera in my bedroom because my dog had been having seizures earlier that year and I wanted to check on him when I wasn't home. I opened the footage next, and at 3:12 a.m. I was asleep in bed. My dog was asleep on the floor beside me, and the front porch camera and the bedroom camera were recording at the same time. In one video, I was asleep upstairs. I called my sister and she answered half asleep and thought someone had died because I was crying so hard. I sent her the clips and she called me back immediately and told me not to go downstairs. I hadn't planned to. I stayed in my bedroom with the door locked while she called my brother and had him drive over. He got to my house about 20 minutes later and walked around the outside before coming in, and he said he checked everywhere and he couldn't find anybody. The front door was still locked from the inside, and he came upstairs and watched the clips in my room. At first he tried to say maybe I sleepwalked, and then I showed him the bedroom footage. He didn't say anything after that. We watched the last alert together, and this one was from around 3:29 a.m. The thing that looked like me was still standing on the porch, but now it was closer to the door. It wasn't knocking anymore, it was just listening. And then it said, "She's not supposed to be awake yet." My brother paused the video and we both just stared at the screen. He stayed with me until morning, and as soon as the sun came up, we checked the porch. And there was nothing out there, no damage or any sign that anyone had tried to break in. The doorbell camera had recorded everything clearly, but there was nothing to prove who it was. I sent the videos to the police, which is silly, but I did it anyway. They told me it was probably someone trying to scare me, maybe wearing a mask or using audio from my social media, and I get why they said that. It sounds more reasonable than the alternative. But that person knew the exact shirt I was sleeping in. They knew the tone of my voice when I'm tired, and they showed up at my front door while I was asleep upstairs. I changed my locks and added another camera and stayed with my sister for a few nights. Nothing happened again, not that I know of, but I still have the videos. And every time someone tells me it was probably just a prank, I ask them the same thing. How did they know I was supposed to be asleep? Anyway, good luck sleeping tonight.
A series of spooky stories except for its women's intuition. A website and an app with long-form content is on its way. I was walking home from school when I was about 9 years old, and I saw my mom driving up the street where I was. Not particularly unusual, but I stopped dead in my track, walked up to her window and asked if Grandma and Grandpa had been in a car accident. They had, and that's why she had come to get me. They were okay, but I'll never forget. I hate being late for anything. It gives me intense anxiety. When I was in college, I was walking to work. I went to turn down the street to walk to my job, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't walk down that street. I knew that taking the long route would mean that I would be late for work, but I knew I couldn't walk down that street. I took the long route and arrived late. When I reached my office, everyone was standing in a group staring out the windows. I asked what was going on. I was told that an upper floor window from the building across the street had popped out. It had fallen onto the street and killed a pedestrian. The same street I couldn't walk down. Holy fucking shit. I went on a trail with 2 of my friends. They're a couple. The girl found it some months before, but had never been. I tried not to be too cooped up at home, so I said yes to going, and I brought my usual safety stuff. Parked off the dirt road, and we walked into the forest. About 30 minutes into walking, I started getting a feeling. On top of that, my lupus started mildly flaring up. Thankfully, I have friends who don't play about me, so we turned back and just walked the dirt road for a little bit since we were close to the car. A nice gentleman in a truck and reflective vest informs me that it was day 2 of the 4-day open hunting season. There were other cars parked packed already when we got there. Needless to say, we got the fuck up out of there. I will never deny my intuition. I don't remember the year, but it was around Christmas time. I had a weird feeling. It was not exactly good or bad, just an odd feeling. I told my sister about it as we were driving home, and she paid close attention, and that if she wouldn't, we would have been T-boned by a truck coming out of a driveway, and I would have died. He would have hit my side of the car by the truck. I wasn't planning to go to the hospital a week ago. My husband went to TEEX. I don't know why that was so hard for me to say. For training and left on a Sunday. Sunday night, sharp pain before I was supposed to leave. Monday felt fine. Tuesday, woke up feeling like poo, and I told my hubby to have his EMS coworkers to come check me out. As soon as I unlocked the door, I dropped to the floor. My BP was 60/30. Blood sugar was 200. Internal bleeding somewhere. I had a bad feeling before being checked out. Doctors confirmed that I was definitely bleeding out and most likely would have been dead within 2 hours if I hadn't had 2 bags of blood in the ER. In high school, my older sister and I got dropped off in the morning by our mom. She usually dropped us off in the front of the school on the sidewalk, and we'd have to make our way past the library and through the gate, but this day I had a feeling to just ask my mom to drop us off on the side of the school, so we'd go through the side gate. 45 minutes later, in first period, the whole school went into lockdown for almost 2 hours. We didn't find out till we got home that a librarian shot herself in the car in front of the library. Some students saw her, oh my god, and believed she shot herself before students got to campus. Oh my Lord, have mercy. My intuition is tied to people that I deeply care for or feel connected to. I was in middle school at the time. I usually spent my summer with family in North Carolina. I was a few weeks from going back home when I got the sudden urge to call my friends. This was when you needed a calling card. I know, I'm old. I called my best friend's house because I just felt like everyone was there. I asked, where's Bella? Elle said she's here. I said, tell her she's not pregnant. I don't know where that came from, but I was compelled to say it. Elle then responded with, how did you know? We were just about to walk to CVS for a pregnancy test. I said, call me back and update me. She never called back, but when I got home, she said that the test came back negative. How did you know? I have several others about predicting deaths. This was my first experience, and they only got stronger after this until I asked for Pandora's box to be closed. It was getting a bit overwhelming. Yeah, I can imagine. Again, the website and the app are coming soon. I'm very, very excited. I cannot wait until it's up. I will let you guys know as soon as I possibly can. And I'll see you all at the next episode.
The person that sent me the story called it, my childhood best friend came to me in my dreams for years. By the way, if you have a story that you'd like to share with our glitch community about glitches in the Matrix, dreams, aliens, cryptids, or the paranormal, you can send it to this email address. And remember, we believe you. Hi, Auntie. Hi. I've been debating telling the story for a long time, partly because of emotion, partly because no one else I know other than my husband and sister will believe me. We will believe you, my friend. That's our whole thing here. For backstory, when I was 12 to 15, I had a neighbor who was in her 90s. Her name was Bertha. The neighborhood kids used to pick on her, and make fun of her for being wrinkly and having saggy skin. And the one time I was with them, when they went to her door and they mocked her, I vowed to never hang out with them anymore and started hanging out with her. Oh my God, I love you so much right now. Thank you for being kind to Bertha. I went over there every day, multiple times a day sometimes. This lasted for years. She became my best friend, truly. She had Alzheimer's and her short-term memory was gone, so she would tell me the same stories over and over. I never minded. I just loved spending time with her. We would talk, listen to music. I'd bring my dog over and we would play with her together. We would watch TV and I'd tell her stories from school and my other friends. She truly was incredibly important to me. One day when I was 15, I noticed a bunch of cars around her house. I walked over and found her son, who told me that she went to a nursing home. It was a small place, very much like a regular house. It took me a long time to go visit her in that place. I was scared to see her like she was a patient. Plus, I knew that I wouldn't be able to sit and talk with her like we used to, and I was grieving that part of our relationship. Finally, my mom took me over there. She had been there for a month by the time I got the nerve to go. When I was there, she told me about me. She told me how where she used to live, there was a young girl my age that would come visit her every day and talk and listen to music and play with her dog. But she didn't realize that I was that girl. I'm not proud of it, but I couldn't go back after that because I was heartbroken that she didn't remember. I know that shit is like so hard. It took me years to realize that she did remember me. She just didn't remember my face. She remembered our time together. She told people about me. I was important enough to her and in her life long enough to be embedded in her long-term memory. She just didn't remember my face. Now for the dreams. She lived directly across from my mom's house. That house belongs to someone else now, of course, but to me, it will always be her house. For years, I would have the same dream, but it wouldn't be like a dream. When I dream, I am very rarely myself. I'm always seeing through the eyes of someone else, and it's always fantasy. So when I dream about being me, it's usually a nightmare or memory of some trauma, except when I dreamt about her. I would be at my mom's house, and whatever age I was in real life would be the age I was in my dream. My kids would be their correct ages. My mom's house would be the layout accurate to how she had it in real life, in real time, but it was clearly a dream. It always went the same way. My kids were in the kitchen with my mom making cookies or brownies or some kind of dessert. My husband would be in the basement or garage with my stepdad. I would be standing near the dining room table, and I always felt very at peace. I'd walk to the living room, stopping by her chair and turning to face the bay window, which looked out towards Bertha's house. That's what I would see her sitting on the front porch in her lawn chair. She would smile at me through the window and wave at me. I would freeze, stop breathing, and my vision would tunnel to her. Then I would break away from the window and run outside across the road to the sidewalk in front of her house. I'd always say the same thing, even though I would remember that this happened 2, 3, 4, 5 times before. "What are you doing here?" I'd say. "What do you mean?" she'd ask, smiling. "I'm always here." "But you died years ago. How are you here?" I'd ask. She would just smile and tilt her head, shaking it lightly, and go, "I'm just saying hello." And then I would wake up. Well, that went on for years. I probably had that dream every 6 months for 4 years. Ever since I moved up north with my husband in October of 2019, the dream started in November of that year. Until finally, just before I was set to move back to my hometown in September of 2023, I had the dream again. It started out the same. Kids in the kitchen with my mom, the correct ages that they were in real life. I was my age, my husband was his, my mom and stepdad too. Her house was the same as she had recently remodeled it. But this time, when I walked to the living room and looked out the window, Bertha wasn't sitting on her porch. Instead, I heard my husband come upstairs with my stepdad, and I went to the door, meeting him over there, my mom bringing the kids to the door and helping them get their shoes on. We walked outside, went to the back of our vehicle, and got a wagon out of the back and put my youngest son in it. We then began to walk down the road, my daughter waving at my mom and stepdad on the porch. They went inside, and we were about 3 or 4 houses down when I stopped walking and just stood there thinking, I felt something in the air, but I was confused. Then I spun around quickly, and my eyes immediately went to Bertha on her porch. My chest filled with emotion, and I gasped. Without wasting even a second, I ran to her. I ran across her yard, jumped up onto the porch, not even using the stairs, and threw my legs over the railing. She stood up when I landed on the porch, and I threw my arms around her, sobbing and shaking harder than I ever had. I smelled her perfume. I felt the fake grass carpet under my feet as I had kicked my shoes off as I ran. I heard her laugh and say, "I missed you." I started sobbing harder, and I said, "I miss you. I love you so, so much." She pulled out of the hug but kept her hands on my arms, smiled, and said, "I'll see you Sunday." Then I woke up. We moved on a Sunday. That day I went to visit her at the cemetery, which I had never done before because I didn't know specifically where she was buried, but I found her on a Sunday. I haven't had that dream since, but I feel her every time I go past her house when I visit my mom. I still call her my best friend, and I know some people probably think that's pathetic that a 14-year-old, my best friend was 93, but I don't care. And to this day, I swear she was visiting me while I didn't live in the area. It's the only explanation that I can think of. The end. Oh my God, my heart. First of all, you're not pathetic. It's not pathetic. I think the fact that you were friends with her at 93, that you did that and you spend so much time to her is like the sweetest thing in the freaking world. I love you for that. I think it's so beautiful. And I think that that's what she needed. And I think that you gave her what she needed and she appreciated it too. She clearly thought that you were her best friend too, because she kept coming to visit you when you weren't over there. I love that so much. I love when our loved ones visit us in dreams, but I love that she kept coming to you when you weren't in the area. Now that you're in the area, she's like, oh, she can come see me. I don't have to go see her anymore. Even though I'm sure part of you wishes she would come visit you in a dream. You can ask her. Oh, the story was beautiful and I loved it so much. Thank you so much for sharing.
Someone left a comment asking if I have any stories about psychic dreams. And so I searched my inbox, and while I have many emails from people claiming to have predicted things like pregnancy in a friend or an illness in a family member, and I completely believe those people, I think dreams are sort of a gateway, I did come across one email that is extremely interesting, and it's from someone named Mac. And Max says when he was 17, he had a dream that stayed with him for years. And when he first had this dream, he thought it was related to his father's surgery the following morning. But in the dream, he was standing on the deck of a large ship in the middle of a black ocean. He said it was the most vivid dream he's ever had, and the water was perfectly still around the ship, and it was so still, in fact, that he could see the reflection of the stars, and there was no sound on the water besides the groaning of the ship. In the dream, he looked around and realized that he was alone on the deck, so he went inside the cabin of the ship and was walking down these long hallways, and there were like flickering yellow lamps on the walls. And he said the ship felt abandoned, but he could sense that there were people nearby, but he didn't feel afraid. Eventually, he found a small room with the door open, and inside he found 3 people that were huddled underneath blankets, and they looked exhausted and cold. And he remembers in the dream, he kneeled beside them and said, "You won't be alone." And they asked him, "Is help coming?" He says because it was a dream so long ago, he can't remember all of the details of the conversation, but he sat with them for what felt like hours, and they talked about all sorts of things like favorite foods, places they lived, and stories from their lives. And he remembers telling them some jokes, which he didn't think were that funny, but they laughed anyway. At one point in the dream, he remembers the entire room lighting up and getting brighter, not from like a lamp, but just from everywhere all at once. And then he snapped awake. The last thing he remembered was one of the people smiling. And he said that when he woke up, he thought that this was a subconscious dream related to what he was feeling about his father's surgery the following day, because it was a major surgery. It wasn't scary, and so he didn't really try to find another explanation for it because it didn't feel like it mattered that much. His father's surgery passed and everything was fine, but for years it remained the most vivid dream that he had ever had, and one that he could kind of like pull memory from at will. But then in college, he said he was watching a documentary one night about the sinking of the MS Estonia in 1994. And something about the footage stopped him cold because he remembered being on that ship, even though he had never been on it. But then he was like, why do I have this memory of being on this ship when I know that I've never been on a ship even vaguely similar to this? But as he watched it, he recognized the yellow lights from the lights in his dream, and he recognized the long, narrow hallway. And there was even one shot in the documentary that opened up into a cabin that he remembers seeing in this dream. When the MS Estonia sunk in the Baltic Sea in 1994, more than 800 people died, though there were some survivors. He said he checked the date of the disaster out of curiosity, and it happened in September of 1994, the same week that his father had surgery. Now he said, I'm not psychic. I'm not claiming that I visited anyone. I know that dreams are strange and that coincidences happen, but I can still remember that dream vividly. And every time I think about that dream, I remember those 3 people that I talked to for what seemed like hours into that night. And I hope that if there was some kind of lapse in time and I was talking to those people, I hope that I provided them comfort. Mac is his real name, and he will be seeing the comments. He might even be in the comments. So let him know if you have thoughts. If you've ever had a strange dream or something that you can't explain between waking and sleep, let us know. I would love to expand on this topic further.
Here's a interesting story that comes out of Montana. Now, there was this woman who lived near the Pryor Mountains on the reservation. And one day, she was at home with her 2 children. Now, her 6-month-old was in the bedroom with her on the floor on a blanket, and she was changing his diaper. And her other son, who was 4 years old, was in the living room. Well, as she is with the 6-month-old, she said out of the corner of her eye, she sees something run past the door really fast. It was about the same size as her 4-year-old son. And so she just thought like he was up to something. So she's like, I better get up and go check on him. So she gets up, she goes down the hallway. But when she comes in the living room, she notices that her son is on the couch and he's asleep. And so she's like, okay, well, what did I just see? Because it looked just like my son. Now, after this, she had several instances where she thought she would see her son run by, or she thought for a second she would catch a glimpse of her son standing around the corner. And then one night, she was in bed, and she was asleep, but she kind of was going in and out, and she had her eyes closed. And she said all of a sudden, she started to hear what sounded like door creaking. And then as she turns over and she looked in the direction of the door, she said standing next to the doorway was what looked like her son. And so she said, what's wrong? You know, did you have a nightmare? Like, just come into the bed and you can sleep with mommy tonight. So she feels something get in the bed. And she kind of feels like the pressure of the mattress moving down. And that's when she started to hear this weird kind of breathing, like this deep breathing. And she thought maybe something was wrong with her son. So she said when she turned over and she's like, honey, what's wrong? She looked and she said on the corner of the bed, standing kind of hunched over, staring at her, was this 3-foot man-like creature with this very large fat head, this skinny-like body, these very large black eyes. And she said it was just staring at her, making this loud breathing sound. And she started to scream. This thing jumped off the bed, and it jumped out an open window, and it took off running off into the distance. And she called her brother, who came over. They searched the property. They didn't find anything. But her brother looks at her and says, you know, grandmother always told us about these things. These are the little people of the Pryor Mountain. Have you ever heard of Sam the Clown? Now, Sam the Clown is an old UK legend that goes back to 1973 in the Isle of Wight. Now, there were these two kids. They were playing outside near the stream when they started to hear what sounded like a siren. And at first they thought maybe it was an ambulance or a police car. So they followed the sound. And it leads them over to this bridge. And right near the water, they begin to see something bubbling. And out of the water comes this 7-foot tall creature that they described as looking like something that was a robot, clown, alien hybrid. Now, this thing walked very stiff with its arms out, very robotically. They described it as having eyes that were triangular shaped, a rectangle nose, and an oval shaped mouth. It had this big circular head with some sort of clown makeup on. It was wearing this clown-like costume with all these strange metallic shapes all over it. It had this big pointy yellow hat with some sort of antennae sticking out of it. And this was unlike anything they had seen before. So they describe it as a cross between some sort of robot, alien, hybrid. And now, after they see this thing, it approaches them. And it starts saying to them, all color Sam. I am all color Sam. And it goes on to tell them that it lives in the woods, that it has sort of this weird little shack, and it invites the kids to follow them back to wherever it lived out in the woods. So these two kids follow it through the woods, and they're led into some kind of portal, which takes them into this big metallic room. And from there, it's said that they had this 30-minute conversation with this creature. And it went on to tell them how there were more of these things, and that they were afraid of humans, so they tried to avoid them at all costs possible. These kids asked this thing, you know, what are you? Are you a ghost? He said, I'm not a ghost, but I sort of am a ghost. And he went on to tell me, you know, I'm very much like you. I drink water from the stream. I eat. And I eat the berries in the woods. And he showed them that he ate some berries, except he did not eat them in a normal way. He put them in his ear. And then he proceeds to tell them, that there are more of these things, and that one day he will return and he will see them again 4 more times if they wish. And then, like that, he just vanished, and this shack vanished. And these kids were left confused as to what they had just experienced. Now, this made national headlines in the UFO community. Everyone was talking about it. These kids seemed very believable that they'd actually seen something out there in the forest. But the question is, what was it? What did they encounter? Now, one of the theories that I've heard is that these things are, very similar to what the Native Americans call kachina, these type of spirits that are said to live under the water or up in the mountains, but they have almost a very robotic-like appearance. There have been many reports, famous encounters such as the Pascagoula incident, where people have encountered these robotic type of extraterrestrials, often associated with UFO activity. But one of the scariest theories that I've heard about these things is that perhaps these are some kind of interdimensional beings, and we don't have the ability to fully understand what they are. So when we see them, our mind has to try and make sense of what they are. So we perceive them as something that we know, something we're familiar with, such as a clown or a robot or, a tree or something that looks natural to us. But is it possible that these are some sort of ultra-terrestrial entities from a ultra dimension? So I'm curious, have you heard of anything like Sam the Clown? Have you had any experiences? Or what do you even think of this story? What do you think they encountered that day in 1973?
This story was sent to me by a viewer named Anne, and she's from the UK. And she told me that she's never been able to explain what happened that morning, and even years later, she still refuses to look through roof windows before sunrise. And I want to know if anyone that lives over there has had a similar experience, because I've gotten quite a few of these. Now, a few years ago, Anne was still living with her parents in an older house in the UK. And the back of the house had a small extension that had been built decades earlier with 2 roof windows set directly into the ceiling. And that's going to be important. Now, the roof itself was old and covered in loose gravel, so whenever anything stepped on it, you could hear every movement from inside of the house. And at the time, her sleep schedule was completely backwards, right? She'd stay awake all night and she would sleep through most of the day. One summer morning around 4 o'clock, everyone else in the house was asleep when she went downstairs to use the bathroom in that part of the extension. And as she got closer to the extension, she heard something overhead. And at first it sounded like footsteps, and then the footsteps became more of a running, and then it became a dragging. And then finally it became this very hard impact, she said. And it wasn't a few noises here and there. She said it sounded like someone wearing heavy boots was sprinting across the roof, back and forth, jumping from one side to the other, stomping so hard that the ceiling was like vibrating and felt like it was maybe going to cave in. And Anne said she didn't panic at first. Living in the UK, where homes are connected, you hear your neighbors all the time. And she figured maybe someone was working on a nearby roof, or maybe a large animal had gotten up onto there somehow. So she shrugged it off and she went into the bathroom. But the moment that she closed the door, the noises became even worse. The running then became faster. The stomping then became even more harder and violent. And it sounded like whoever or whatever was above her knew exactly where she was in the house. And it was back and forth, directly over her head. And then a thought suddenly hit her. Maybe it was the builders, maybe, but they don't work at 4 in the morning over there. They don't work at 4 in the morning really anywhere like that in a residential area. At least not here in the States, and according to her, not in the UK. And no animal that she'd ever heard sounded like a full-grown person sprinting on 2 legs. She said it was very obvious, you could tell that it was 2 legs. And she finished as quickly as she could in the bathroom, and her hand shook as she reached for the doorknob, and the second that she opened the bathroom door, there was silence. She said it didn't fade away, not footsteps walking off. She said the minute she touched that doorknob, it went completely silent in an instant. And one moment, there had been this absolute chaos going on above her, and then the next there was nothing. And every hair on her arms and her back and her neck and everything was standing up. Her spidey senses were tingling, because that old roof, it did work both ways. If she had been able to hear whatever was up there, then whatever had been there could almost certainly hear her too. So she slowly walked beneath one of the roof windows, and she looked up, and there was nothing. Only the pale blue morning sky. She waited 10 seconds, and then a couple more seconds went by, and there was still not a single sound. And it felt less like whatever had been there had now left, and more like it was standing maybe, perfectly still, maybe waiting. Did it leave? She didn't know, right? And then movement began slowly again, and a small head rose into view from the edge of that roof window. And the instant that it realized Anne was now looking at it, it snapped its head back out of sight. And she says that's the image that she can never erase from her memory, because it wasn't a child, it wasn't a person. It was wearing it didn't even look like it was wearing dark clothing. She said it was simply just black, like a black figure, but you could tell very obviously that it was a head. It wasn't dark skinned, it was, not hiding in the shadows. It was just completely black, like someone had cut the shape out of a small person, and it was darker than reality itself. She said there were no eyes, no mouth, no nose, no details, no nothing. Just this black silhouette staring down through the glass. And she estimates that it would have only come up to about maybe her chest level if it had been standing beside her. And her first instinct was to convince herself that it had to be maybe it was a person, maybe it was a trick of the light. But one question wouldn't leave her, and it was, why hadn't she heard it run away, if so? So she kept staring at the roof window, waiting, and then without warning, the figure exploded into this motion. And she said it didn't walk, it didn't climb, it literally launched itself across the roof window in a single leap, so fast that she barely had time to register what she was looking at. Then less than a second later, the running began again, and only this time it was moving away from her. She heard it sprint across her roof, leap onto the neighbor's extension, and then another, and eventually it was gone. And each impact was getting further and further away until there was no longer any sound or any sign of it whatsoever. At this point, years have passed since that morning, and she still doesn't know what exactly it was that she saw. Maybe exhaustion was playing tricks on her mind. Maybe there really is another explanation for it. But every now and then, just before sunrise, when the world is quiet, she'll remember that perfectly black, blank face slowly rising into view above her in that glass. And she'll wonder for always, if it wasn't watching the house, was it waiting? Was it waiting for someone to look? Was it waiting for someone to notice it? I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Like I said, this was a weird one, because I've gotten at least 3 to 4 other submissions exactly like this. I mean, literally down to the details, in that UK area. Same black face, that just emptiness, always up on the roof, always peeking through windows, and the same thing with the running and that racket going back and forth. So if you're from the UK, or if you've been there and you've experienced this, please let me know.
I never believed in the rake until I saw something crawling faster than any human ever could. When I was 17, my cousin and I decided to have a sleepover on my grandpa's property. He owned 80 acres of woods, and we spent our entire childhood discovering them and exploring them. We were never scared of being out there. We grew up there. Around midnight, our fire ran out of wood, so I offered to go find some more branches in the tree line. About 30 feet into the woods, and then I heard a little bit of crunching coming from the left of me, not behind me, so I knew it wasn't my cousin or my grandpa. It was from the left of me. And I bent down to grab some branches, and then I heard it again, but it seemed like it was a little closer this time. So I shined my flashlight over. This time I caught movement. It was a very pale figure and went behind a tree. At first I thought it might have been a deer, but it was something that was on all fours. I don't know what it was, but I could not stop staring. I absolutely froze. I fight or flight or freeze. I froze. It leaned around the tree and you could see its arms. They were so long. You could see most of its ribs. It was very, very skinny. And the head was tilted so far, like it didn't seem like it was possible. So I knew it definitely couldn't be human and it couldn't be a deer. Anyways, everything inside of me told me that I should run away, but I just kind of slowly backed away. And it was just sitting there watching me. The second I reached the edge of our campsite, my cousin looked at me and he's like, "Why do you look like you just saw a ghost?" And then before I could even answer, his face dropped and he said, "What is that?" I turned around again and the thing disappeared again. Neither of us slept that night. The next morning we went out to go search the area and there wasn't anything, there was no animal footprints or human footprints. There wasn't anything that would have seemed like something was there. The only thing that we saw was the tree where we both had saw it. There was 4 super long scratch marks and it was like too high where I don't think an animal would have done it unless a bear completely climbed the tree. I don't know. I've spent years trying to explain it. I think I've filled in details in my brain that weren't actually there. I tell myself it was just a really sick bear. The only thing that bothers me is when my cousin and I have talked about it, he described it exactly how I saw it before I even told him what I saw. So our descriptions completely matched.
In Oklahoma, there have been more drownings that are unexplained, people disappearing on the water, on lakes in this area, than any other place in the world. Now, a lot of people attribute this to what they believe is some sort of giant aquatic creature that lives in 3 lakes in Oklahoma. Now, I've studied this extensively, and I believe, without a doubt, there is something residing in Lake Thunderbird. Now, this story comes from actually Lake Thunderbird. There was this fisherman who said one night he went out on his bass boat, and he was out in the middle of the lake. He had cast several lines out, and he said he was just sitting there in his boat. Said, it was just a calm, clear night. The moon was out. There wasn't another boat in sight. And he said he just got this like eerie feeling. And he noticed just how calm, how still and placid the water was. And he said it was just like very quiet, which was odd. And he said all of a sudden, off in the distance, he hears a loud splashing sound. And then over in the other direction, he hears another loud splashing sound. And then in another direction, he hears this loud splashing sound. And he said as he looked out over the water with the moonlight shining on it, he started to see sort of this wake appear, and something very large was moving in the water towards his boat. And it got within a few meters, and then he said it just submerged it, and the water was calm. And so he said, what, I'm out of here, I'm pulling the lines in, and I'm going to leave. So he started reeling his lines in, and he said the next thing he remembers, like, he felt this sharp pain up the back of his leg all the way to his back. And he finds himself flying out of the boat into the water and going under. And he said the water was just murky, dark. He couldn't see anything. Something had a hold of him and was pulling him under. And he said that's when he sees these 2 luminous eyes that are staring at him. And he just started to fight as hard as he could to get out of like whatever this was hold. He said he managed to get free, and he starts swimming towards the light of his boat, gets up in his boat, and he just accelerates towards the shore. He gets to the dock, gets out of the boat, and he goes up to the shore. And that's when he notices he has several lacerations all up his leg and all up his back. And he said right at that moment, he heard a loud splashing sound right by the dock. And he said there was this canoe that was tied off. And he said these like tentacles came out of the water, grabbed onto this canoe, and submerged this thing. And he said it just terrified him, and he ran out of there and has not been back to this place since. This second story takes place in the same area at the RV park. There was a woman who was staying there. She takes her dog one night for a walk along the lake. And she said she just remembered hearing splashing sounds coming from the water. And at first she thought it was just like a fish, but she said, whatever it was really large. As she's walking along the water line, she said she just kept hearing the splashing, like whatever this was following her. Then it got quiet for a little bit, and she said, well, it must be gone, whatever it was. She said the next thing she knows, her dog just starts barking and alerting her to something. She looks up ahead, and she said she sees this thing that was as large as a cow, and it's dragging itself along the shore. And she said her dog managed to slip the leash and takes off running towards this thing. She hears her dog yelp. This thing grabbed her dog and just starts dragging it into the water. And she said, it just threw her off guard and like terrified her. And she couldn't believe that there was something in the water that could take a 90-pound dog and just drag it into the water like it was nothing. This third story comes once again in the same general area. There was a man went out fishing one night on the shore, and he said, he cast his line out, and the next thing he knows, he said he's seen this just bright light in the sky. And he said he noticed it just kept getting brighter and brighter, and that's when he could see that this was some sort of like ball of light. And he said it just hovered over the lake, and it was kind of moving back and forth. And then he said it dropped down and it went into the water, and he watched this thing submerge. And he said he could see like the glow of it as it went under the water, and then it just disappeared. So the next thing he knows, they're splashing right where his line is cast out. And he said he just dropped his pole and he ran off. And he said that like shook him up pretty bad. And he thinks that whatever was in that lake was associated to whatever that light was that he's seen in the sky. You have to understand that when you go into the Appalachian Mountains, you are entering into another realm. And there is a set of unspoken rules that you must follow. Rule number 1, if you hear something calling your name, right, you didn't. There is nothing there. And you should not respond. Do not say hello. Do not say, who is it? Just run away. Because something is trying to gain permission. And by you acknowledging it, you are allowing it to come after you. If you hear screams in the mountains, right, you didn't. And do not go towards the direction of the screams to try and help. Because once again, something is trying to lure you. If you see people, you don't. If you hear crying, you're not hearing it. Do not respond to this at all because you are giving permission to whatever is in those woods to come after you. Now, if you are to go camping in the Appalachian Mountains, right, you have to remember, at night, you must keep a fire going at all times. And it's not for warmth, it's not for cooking, it's to keep you safe. And if you are going to camp in a tent, make sure when you go into that tent, it is sealed up. There are no holes, there are no cracks. And if you hear any kind of screaming, yelling, or anyone calling your name, do not respond. Do not go to sleep. And if something wakes you up, stay up, stay alert, and once again, do not respond. Now, it's very important when you are walking through the Appalachian Mountains, if you come across a deer carcass, do not touch it, do not stare at it, walk away, ignore it, because this is something, once again, trying to lure you into the woods. Now, if it comes to the point that something is chasing you, and it gets you, and there is no escape, fight. Fight as hard as you can, whether it's a person, an animal. If it's something else, though, and you know what I'm talking about, well, you just let it get you, right? Because at that point, there's nothing you can do. And there's an old saying, you go into the Appalachian Mountains with 2 bullets, right? You fire the first one at something that isn't a person, that isn't an animal. And if it doesn't run away, you know what to do with the second one.
I wanted to share something that happened to me when I was younger because it's something I still think about to this day. And honestly, I still don't know how to explain it. When I was a young teen, I woke up in the middle of the night. My room was completely dark and quiet. Suddenly, I began hearing something coming from my closet. It sounded like rustling, almost like someone was moving around inside. Then I heard what sounded like footsteps. At first, I tried to convince myself that I was just tired or imagining things, but the feeling that someone was in there wouldn't go away. So I quietly said, "Hello?" Not super loud, but loud enough that if there really was someone hiding in my closet, they would have heard me. But nothing happened. There was no response, no movement, just complete silence. After a little while, I decided I was probably just freaking myself out, so I turned over and tried to go back to sleep. That's when I felt something grab my ankle. It wasn't harsh, and it didn't feel like it was trying to hurt me. It was actually gentle, almost like someone was just holding onto my ankle. But I could feel it clearly. I could feel fingers wrapped around me, and I knew it wasn't my cat because it didn't feel like a paw. It felt like actual fingers. I completely froze. I remember feeling terrified because I knew what I had felt, but I had no explanation for it. A couple of months before this happened, my aunt had passed away. At the time, I had been feeling really guilty because I never got the chance to talk to her much, and I always worried that maybe she didn't know I cared about her. After thinking about this experience for a long time, I started wondering if maybe it was her. Maybe it wasn't something scary trying to frighten me. Maybe it was her way of saying hello and letting me know that she forgave me. I'll never know exactly what happened that night, but I like to believe that if it really was her, she was just reminding me that she was still there.
I've always thought that my house was haunted by the spirit of a woman. One night, during a small get-together with some friends and family, while everyone was drunk, this photo was taken. Right behind the group, in the very center, there's the face of a woman with glowing eyes. We thought it might be the ghost because no one knows who she is. Last Saturday, I was at my aunt's house for a barbecue, and early Sunday morning, I took this photo. I noticed a face in the window on the left when there was nobody else inside the house. This happened to my boyfriend on December 7th, 2025. My boyfriend was home alone. It was already nighttime and the lights were off. He was in the living room and the lights suddenly turned on by themselves. The moment he began recording, a frying pan was thrown, even though it was in a position where it couldn't have fallen on its own. This photo was taken at the Pirate House in Savannah, Georgia. I was the only person walking down this corridor and was taking photos to try and capture some spirits. I know that this wasn't a person because the hallway only goes straight and there's no openings on either side. When I was approaching that spot in the hallway and when I passed it, there was absolutely nobody there.
Want to get creeped out? Have you ever heard of the Midnight Man? The Midnight Man is one of those creepy games or rituals where multiple people can participate and they essentially invite the Midnight Man into their home. Was this ritual likely made up on the internet? Yeah, it was. But a ritual is still a ritual. And when people try rituals and invite things from the paranormal into their home, sometimes shit happens. And sometimes that's just terrifying. So if you're interested in learning about this ritual, I wouldn't suggest doing it, but if you're interested in learning about it, check out Jessica and I's podcast episode, Creepy Games and Rituals, from Just a Little Stitches. Okay? And then prepare yourself because we also have a story. July is all creepy games and rituals. 2 different stories of people who tried this ritual. And let me just tell you, the one I couldn't sleep after hearing. So, want to get creeped out? Have you ever heard of the Midnight Man ritual? I have a story of someone who tried it. Like, essentially, you're inviting what's known as the Midnight Man into your house. Why would you do that? I don't know, but some people try it and have like really paranormal experiences. And in particular, Jess has a story that she tells us about on a podcast episode where this couple thinks it would be a fun date night and they try to do the Midnight Man or the Midnight Game, and they literally start hearing things in their walls. I don't know. It's literally one of the scariest creepy games and ritual stories I've ever heard, ever. It actually kept me up at night, so I just wanted to give you guys a heads up that you might want to hear that one.
A couple, boyfriend, girlfriend, who lived together, played the Midnight Game with the Midnight Man. So they wanted to try it as like a date night type situation.
That's crazy.
Because the thing that they clicked on is their love for like the supernatural.
Oh, cool. Mm-hmm.
And they had always wanted to like try rituals. It was him who sent it in. He had even pointed out that they wanted to do the 3 kings at some point.
Oh, okay, cool.
There was a few they wanted to try. But anyway,
what's their names?
Ian and Sophie. So they start getting everything together, names on paper, blood on paper, candle on paper, knocking on the door. They do all the things. They start walking around and they're walking around together. They're talking and like they were talking about how they want to do more of this. They're both both wearing hoodies. They've both got a big Ziploc bag of salt in each of their pockets. Smart. And a lighter. And also, they're from Canada. Fun fact. We love to hear it. They're walking and they're chatting. The layout of the house, from what I understand from the description, it's like door and then dining room, kitchen, living room, and you can basically see it all. And there's a hallway that goes down to like bedrooms and bathroom and stuff. But like in the middle, there's like some type of shelving unit.
Okay,
like
gotcha.
Straight up floor to ceiling, right in the middle. So it's kind of like a circle, and then the shelving faces where their dining room is. So it's like kind of like a square, I guess, that they're able to walk in, which is convenient for something like this, if you ask me.
Totally.
They're walking together, walking through the living room. They both get chills at the same time, but they're both telling each other that like it's in their heads because they're like, you know, actively playing the game. This didn't happen right away either, by the way. Like they had done a few laps and they keep walking. Nothing really happens till one point they go down the hallway. And then as they're coming back up the hallway, it sounds like there's something in the walls following them.
In the walls?
In the walls. He doesn't know exactly what it was, but he said the best way to describe it is that something was following us from behind, but in the walls, which
that's really, really disturbing.
Yeah. Get camping, get cozy, spooky, scary story time. Okay, so my previous story, I talked about how we went out and stayed in a cabin this past weekend, right? And while we were there, the day after the creepy stuff happened to us, everybody decides to watch Insidious, right? Everybody voted on a scary movie, and I'm like, not such a great idea. People in the cabins always end up getting killed. And that movie always gives me the creeps, right? Like, I don't know what it is about the movie that scares the shit out of me. We were watching it. We did not end up finish watching it, right? So then we come back home, and my son is like, let's finish the movie. And I'm debating because, like I said, that movie terrifies me. Anyways, we end up watching it, right? And it does scare me, but I'm like, whatever, shrug it off, it's a movie. Tell me why after we watch this movie, the next day, I'm sitting on the sofa, and mind you, I got all this in video. I'm sitting on the sofa, and I have the lid to my Stanley where you rest your hand, right? On the handrest. So in my Stanley, I literally have ice and water, right? And I love chewing on ice. So I'm drinking on my Stanley, right? And I feel like a tug at my cup. I swear to God, I felt when my cup got pulled out of my hand, and a big ass piece of ice that's inside the Stanley flies out at me. And I go back to look in the video on my cameras, and you can see all that. And honestly, this is why for the longest I stopped watching scary movies like that. Because I feel like every time we watch The Conjuring, every time we watch Annabelle, like something creepy would happen. Oh, and I forgot. So 2 days maybe after that happened with the Stanley, my niece came over and we're sitting in the living room, you know, chit-chatting. And I hear something fall. And I looked over her, I'm like, what was that? And she's like stiff and frozen. And she's looking at me and she's like, a peach. And I'm literally like, what do you mean a peach? Because I have a bowl with peaches and different fruit, like on the counter, right? And she's like, there's literally a peach on the ground. So I like look over, and this peach is just in the middle of my kitchen. How did you get from the counter to the floor? And I'm like, and why did no other fruit roll down? Dude, I don't know if that was a coincidence or I don't know. But this is why I kind of stay away from those movies. And I don't know if Insidious is based on a real movie. And I don't even want to look into that if it is. Because it's going to creep me out even more.
Something followed me for over a mile. And then I realized it wasn't alone. Scary story time. About a year ago, I went out at night a few miles from my house. I couldn't get a ride back, so much to my dismay, I had a 6-mile walk ahead of me in the middle of the night. This was in the North Syracuse area of upstate New York, if that matters. I had been walking for a good while when I eventually passed a military Air Force training location. The site was on my right, and along the left side of the road was an extremely tall chain-link fence blocking off some woods that stretched for about 1.5 miles. I assumed this was part of the training area as the fence started where the training building began. After about half a mile into walking alongside the fence, the woods went completely silent. Okay, weird. I kept walking because I didn't think it was that big of a deal. There was a fence, I was fine. Then I heard what I can only describe as a mix between a crow, an angry screaming monkey, and an deranged toddler. In a way, it almost sounded like it was laughing in a threatening manner. I have lived all over the US and never heard a noise like this before in the wild. I walked fast, hoping to pass whatever it was, but I could hear branches snapping and leaves rustling directly across from me in the woods. It was following me. There was no other sound except for this thing. At this point, I'm terrified, so I start sprinting. It was chasing me. And then the sound multiplied. Whatever was following me before, it now sounded like there were at least 5 more. I ran for my life until I made it to a neighborhood and the fence ended. Following this incident, I researched cryptids and animals that could have done this, and I couldn't find anything. So does anyone have any hidden knowledge of what kind of cryptid this could have been? I truly don't think it was an animal, because I can't think of an animal that would have chased me like that while making those noises the whole time. And that's the end of the story. So the story was found on the cryptid subreddit, and there were some Redditors going back and forth in the comment section believing or sharing what they believe OP encountered. And it pretty much broke down into 2 main categories. One being that some people believe that OP actually encountered baby Sasquatches. Some people were mentioning that the state of New York has been known to have Sasquatch sightings, so OP probably experienced that. There are a few other people mentioned that they believe OP probably encountered wild cats. So I kind of want to believe that they did encounter wildcats, only because I have heard that wildcats that roam and live in the forest have been known to make really insane noises or growls or cries that you wouldn't think come from wildcats, but they absolutely do, and it sounds very terrifying. However, OP is from that area, and OP did mention that they grew up all over the US, so I guess they're very familiar with different types of animal sounds, and what they saw wasn't normal. So what do you think OP witnessed? Do you think it actually was a Sasquatch or a wild cat or something else, a different cryptid? If you're from upstate New York, or if you're familiar with the area, what other strange things have gone through the woods, or have you heard of being up there? Again, in the comments, some people are mentioning that there have been Sasquatch sightings in upstate New York. I don't know how true that is. I'm not from the East Coast. I don't know. But if you are from the East Coast or from the area and you're familiar with these stories or have heard of other types of creatures or entities that are up there, drop them in the comments below. I would love to hear about it. Tell me your experiences. But yeah, what do you think OP witnessed? Do you think it was Sasquatch or lion or something else? Let me know.
Unpopular opinion. Maggot painted walls are pleasing aesthetic. I don't know if it's the incessant writhing of 100,000 tiny bodies, or the squishy sounds they make, or the overpowering smells slightly reminiscent of a week-old carcass. But yeah, there's just something extremely soothing about maggot painted walls. For those of you that have asked, all you need is like standard wallpaper adhesive to get them to stick to the wall. They'll die pretty fast though, so after like a day or 2, you're gonna have to scrape them off with like a scraper tool or putty knife, and prepare for smells. I've only done this in a fairly small room. It's about like 10 by 10 feet and about 8 feet from floor to ceiling. But I'm sure you could expand into larger rooms too though. You would just need a whole lot of maggots. So a lot of you have been asking where I buy such a massive quantity of maggots from. And honestly, I don't like buy them. I mean, I suppose you could get them in maybe like pet stores or those bait and tackle shops or something like that, but honestly, I'm literally clueless about that. Look, I'm really no expert in this because I've only been doing it for a couple of months, and it's a long and complicated story, but basically I just wanted to find a fun and unusual way to decorate my son's room. I used to get them from animal carcasses, yeah, like some of my comments has mentioned, but it's not like I go around murdering them. I mean, guys, it is not animal cruelty if they're already dead when my son brings them to me, okay? Why am I suddenly a child abuser, okay? My son just likes to play around with dead animals, okay? There is no law against that. For all the sane people on here, yes, my son does like it when I paint the walls, okay? He thinks the maggots are cool as heck, and it keeps him from eating the dead animals. Well, because he eats the maggots instead, duh. They're a really great source of protein, actually. Healthy. And he doesn't kill them all. Some of them are literally just roadkill. You guys are insane. No, I don't mind letting him play with dead animals at all. Even if he does kill them, you know, they would have died sooner or later. Plus, isn't it better that he's killing animals than people? He's not a psychopath, and neither am I, okay? That thing with his father was an accident, and he is not to blame at all. And so what if some random people die, okay? Who really cares? I mean, they all probably deserved it, okay? My son is a good boy.
Sometimes you can only see the darkness in the shadows. Welcome to the Creepy Cozy Cottage, where creepy and cozy meet. So grab a plushie and get cozy, because it's creepy cozy time at the Creepy Cozy Cottage. Boo and Francesca say hi. When I was around 9 or 10 years old, I had a friend named Morgan. She lived with her little sister, Elena, and their mom in a trailer that seemed to move every few months. The strange thing is that while the trailer itself never changed, its location always did. Every time I visited, it was somewhere new, and somehow every place felt creepier than the last. 1 month they were parked beside an old cemetery. Another, they lived miles from civilization in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by empty fields and darkness. Once, the trailer sat directly across from an abandoned house with boarded-up windows that seemed to watch anyone who passed. It wasn't attached to a church. There were no nearby houses. No roads led directly to it. It simply sat alone in the middle of endless fields as if it had been forgotten by the world. The gravestones were old and weathered, many leaning at odd angles. Some were so worn down that the names had nearly disappeared. Tall grass had grown around many of the graves, and it looked as though no one had visited in years. Even as a child, I thought it was odd. Why would a cemetery be all the way out there by itself? Who were the people buried there? And why did it feel like the entire place had been abandoned decades ago? As kids, we thought it was exciting. Looking back, I wonder if we were too young to realize how unsettling it really was. The experience I remember most happened during the time Morgan's trailer was parked beside that forgotten cemetery. It was a stormy summer night. Rain had hammered against the roof while thunder rattled the thin walls of the trailer. The sky flashed white every few minutes, briefly illuminating the long graveyard outside. Like many curious preteens, Morgan and I decided it would be a great idea to borrow her mother's Ouija board. We sat cross-legged on the floor and began asking questions. Nothing serious at first. How did you pass? Who are you? Are you buried in the cemetery? The planchette began moving, slowly, deliberately. The answers weren't what we expected. Instead of responding to her questions, the board repeatedly spelled out the same message. I'm coming for you. We tried again, the same answer. Again, I'm coming for you. Then we asked who was speaking. The response claimed it wasn't a person. It was a demon. By the third time, we were terrified. We immediately said goodbye and closed the session. Trying to convince ourselves it was all a joke, we carried the board back to Morgan's mom. She laughed when we told her what happened. Everything will be fine, she said. Then she told us to put it back in her room. Neither of us wanted to, but we did. As we stepped into the bedroom, lightning flashed through the window. That's when I noticed the doll. It sat on the nightstand beside the bed. The doll had once belonged to Elena. Years of use had left it dirty and worn. Its hair had been hacked off in uneven chunks, giving it a permanently unsettling appearance. I was staring at it when something caught my attention. its shadow. The doll itself wasn't moving, but the shadow was. The shadow's foot was slowly swinging back and forth, like someone sitting in a chair, absent-mindedly kicking their leg. I froze. Morgan saw it too. For several seconds, we simply stared. The doll remained perfectly still. The shadow continued moving. Then we screamed. We ran from the room and found Morgan's mom. Out of breath, we dragged her back to the bedroom. The shadow was still moving. Back and forth, back and forth. Morgan's mom looked at it for a moment and shrugged. "Oh," she said casually, "the doll must be haunted." That was it. No concern, no investigation. Just matter-of-fact statement before walking away. Neither Morgan nor I slept much that night. The thunder continued for hours. Every crack of lightning illuminated the forgotten cemetery outside the window. When the storm finally weakened, a different sound took its place. Scratching. Slow, deliberate scratching against the bedroom window. At first, I thought it might be tree branches. Then I remembered there weren't any trees close enough. The scratching continued. Every few minutes, scratch, scratch, scratch. Then came the whispering, faint voices just outside the glass, too quiet to understand, almost as if someone was speaking in another room. We pulled the blankets over our head and listened until morning. Neither of us dared to look outside. Morgan's mother practiced Wicca and loved anything spooky, mysterious, or paranormal. Because of that, strange things always seemed to happen whenever I visited. To be honest, this wasn't even the creepiest experience I had at one of Morgan's houses. Just one of the mild ones. But even now, years later, I can still picture that filthy doll sitting motionless on the nightstand while its shadow slowly swung its foot back and forth in the darkness. Francesca would never. Let me know what you thought, and if you have any scary stories of your own you want me to share, just send me a DM.
Want to hear something scary? This video is a little different. It's about you. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I know. I'm so kind. I'm so generous. It's about talking about your stories, listening to your stories. I got a little mic. You love it? It's so cutesy. Anyway, I'll get into the story. Stories. These are my followers' stories. Part 1. ASMR. The commenters' names will be on the screen. This story happened a few years ago when I was younger. At the time, my room was set up so my bed was directly facing the hallway door. And back then, I was extremely afraid of the dark, which often didn't make for a good combination. However, this night, the hallway light was on, as I usually left it, and I went to sleep. But after a while, I woke up. I thought at first it was just one of those weird times where you wake up in the middle of the night and turned back over to go to sleep. However, that's when I was struck with the fact that I was unable to move. The only way I can describe it is that it felt like my legs were twisted in the wrong direction, and I couldn't move them. I panicked, obviously, and strained as hard as I could to move or try to wake myself up, because I thought what I was experiencing was sleep paralysis, and if I woke myself up, it would stop. However, this wasn't the case. After a while of struggling against an imaginary force, I got a peek of the end
might have known the story of real-life boogeyman
of the hallway and locked eyes with a figure in a black suit. He was very tall and was wearing what I could make out to be a top hat. I tried to struggle, but I couldn't move, and whenever I would blink or close my eyes, the figure would appear closer and closer. However, as it approached, it did not walk, it sort of floated. I just remember his jagged coat scraping the wall as he moved towards me. Finally, after what felt like hours, it stopped directly in front of me, and I don't know if I've ever been that terrified. To this day, I don't know what happened next. I didn't fall asleep, and I couldn't scream, but I just blinked and it was morning. I thought it was a dream, or a horrible sleep paralysis experience, and felt oddly relieved it was over. However, when I got up and walked into the hallway, there was a massive scratch ingrained in the texture of the wall that almost looked like claws. I still have no idea what that was. Okay, this story definitely creeped me out, especially because I experience sleep paralysis all the time. This is terrifying. Genuinely terrifying. My sleep paralysis experience, well, this doesn't seem like it was sleep paralysis, but mine wasn't quite as scary. That is terrifying. I have played this game one time before, talking about Red Door, Yellow Door. The day this occurred, I was at one of my friend's houses inside her garage. There were 4 players in total. I was the guide, my friend was in the trance, and my second friend and my friend's little brother were sitting next to us, just watching us play. When we began the game, we had just gotten my friend into the trance, and it was going smoothly. But out of nowhere, my little brother began screaming bloody murder and sprinted out of the garage. We immediately ended the game and ran out after him to ask what had scared him so badly. He wasn't responding at first, but we continued to ask him what he saw. Finally, he whispered that while we were distracted by the game, he looked up and saw a very tall and lanky man wearing a completely white suit in the corner of the room. We haven't played again after that. What is with all these tall, creepy, lanky men in suits? Why are they everywhere? Creepy. Hey, I don't know if it was just my imagination, but I used to live in a brick house. It was old and it looked haunted. I was around 10, I'm 14 now, and I used to see these figures, I guess. They were tall, with no mouth, long arms, and at night, it was all white, but in the daytime, it was all black. However, one of the most haunting parts about it was its lack of eyes. The only time it would ever appear was when I was alone, and any time I would look at it directly, it would completely disappear into thin air. I told my mom about the thing, but she didn't believe me. After we moved, I never saw it again. I don't know if it was attached to the house or if it was just my imagination. It genuinely scared me so bad, I would be sprinting to my parents' room while crying. However, after some time, I got somewhat used to it. Please help me. I don't know what it was or if anyone else had anything similar happen to them with a similar creature. I may be a little crazy, but hopefully I'm not that crazy. Well, in comparison to all the other stories, there's a lot of tall men, so I doubt you're great. Maybe it's the same one. Maybe. I should call someone. I should maybe call someone about that. This story takes place back when I was 12 years old. My friend and I had an interest in scary games, and decided to try playing Cat Scratch. We were pretty experienced in the game, as this was our 5th time playing it. The first few times we played it, nothing serious really happened. It was just us messing around and scaring each other like little kids do. However, when it was my turn, that changed. We played the game, did every step correctly, and when I got up, my back felt odd, sort of, like a burning pain. I asked my friend to look to make sure I wasn't losing my mind, and when he pulled up the back of my shirt, I had long scratch marks and what appeared to be dried blood. Safe to say, we were really freaked out and stopped playing shortly after that. I tried to forget about the whole situation as the day went on. Hours later, I was sitting in my room and heard an odd sound outside my door, sort of like a cat's meow. I don't have a cat, and after that, I just stopped playing horror games completely. That's understandable. That is understandable. I've played Cat Scratch before, and every single time I've played it, it has worked. It's really creepy. I don't know why it works. Horrifying. I do want a cat, though. I would like that. If I got summoned a cat when I played that. Okay, and that was your guys' stories. If I missed you, don't be sad. I'll make another part, I'm sure. Just write your story in the comments or DM me. I'll see you in the next one. What outro was that? I don't even have an outro for this one. Good luck.